Please welcome Nicole Rodriguez-Leach, Grantmakers for Education Executive Director.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Okay, I know y'all are settled, but if anyone is willing to move their bodies this way, that would be wonderful because you're all not centered to our speakers. You'll see them better, they'll see you better. I appreciate your consideration. Good morning, how are you? Happy Friday. I'm really thrilled to see so many of us here still today to build with one another and celebrate the ideas, the insights, the convictions, the connections that we'll all be taking away from this conference. And what a conference it's been. Thinking about yesterday, I was really struck by the words of the youth leaders who were with us. Their questions to Dr. Benjamin were beautifully personal, honest, and also very relatable. They asked her advice on how to maintain their truths while helping their peers navigate their own, how to change the discourse, the narrative, the technology of language around them, about them, and that all forms of knowledge, especially their own, have the great potential to drive and catalyze the other AIs and transformation. Dr. Benjamin's words to the young people were also for all of us. She encouraged them to find their people as they manage a world of rainbow benches and not so rainbow benches. She encouraged them to be wary of not becoming or upholding the rainbow bench themselves. And so for us, let's also look beneath the surface as we design and build out our own critical and creative capacities. So this morning, we'll continue to center education for a thriving democracy. We'll build on the expansive imaginary we tapped into yesterday to consider what's possible in education, where we're hopeful and joyful, and to envision and orient toward our driving sense of purpose for education and for philanthropy, for our organizations and for ourselves. So today we're in for another day with outstanding education leaders who are going to help us widen the lens on education so that we can see it as a critical lever in other social, economic, and political systems and solutions. This morning, we'll first welcome a literacy hero, mental health advocate, who has certainly inspired many families and followers, Michael Threets. Michael will be in conversation with Allison Waka, she too a literacy hero, tribal liaison and Native Relations coordinator at the Metropolitan Council of Twin Cities, and president of the American Indian Library Association. You'll all be welcomed into their conversation, so while listening openly, please know that we'll have some time for questions with them both as well. Allison will let you know when that happens. And we have not one, but two important conversations that matter happening this morning. Following, Abigail Snowden, Chief Growth Officer at Scholarship America, will guide us through a second and incredible panel. And as we typically do, we'll close the conference this morning with a special announcement and several parting words. So with that, let's dive in. I believe we have a video for y'all.
There is a space for everybody at the local library. There's always going to be books, but there's musical instruments, there's board games, there's video games. There really is something for everybody, and that to me is library joy, that we all just get to decide why we love the library, why it brings us joy. My name is Michael Threets. I am obsessed with library joy. I'm a librarian, and I've loved literacy and libraries my entire life. I started out on TikTok at the beginning of the pandemic. I didn't know what to do. It was either download TikTok or get Animal Crossing. I didn't have a Nintendo Switch, so it was TikTok for me. I started out like everybody else, trying to dance, quickly realized I am no dancer. And I remembered I love books and libraries, and I just started making videos about books and libraries. And then I started sharing stories about everyday people from the library, and it really seemed to resonate with people.
The other day I was handing out books, and this person comes up to the table, sees one of the newer Diver Wimpy Kid books, and says, "Diver Wimpy Kid, they're still making those? Those books saved my life. They got..."
My favorite thing about being on social media is just being able to tell the stories. It truly is an honor, a blessing to me. I call myself the narrator of library stories, so it really is just so cool. And the least favorite thing, I think it would shock people to find that I don't like being the center of attention. So being a social media person is kind of being at the center of attention. So there are many days I wish I could be back behind the scenes, but I'm still very thankful for what I get to do, every cool moment I've experienced.
I asked the kids, I said, "Are you guys ready for Leonardo the Terrible Monster?" And they said, "Yeah!" And then they asked.
Most of my go-to book recommendations are tattooed on my arm. I call it my reader's advisory arm, so I always use the monster at the end of this book, Where the Wild Things Are, Alice in Wonderland. And again, it's so individual, but those are some of my absolute favorites. Positive and negatives of being a librarian in this day and age, I think a lot of the positives are just the stories that we get to come across, the people that we get to see, the lives that we get to impact and change on a daily, weekly, yearly basis. The negatives are just our funding. We need more funding to support libraries. Libraries deserve everything good. Ban books, of course. I mean, everybody deserves access to books. We should all be celebrating the freedom to read, not banning books and removing access to books. So the biggest challenge in 2024 around literacy is honestly it's literacy rates. It's people actually wanting to read. Literacy is the answer to liberation. That's how we become free, important, influential human beings. Literacy is how we become the best possible humans in the world, and it's my mission to remind people of that through joy and more so through conversation.
So Michael and Allison, please join us. You ended in that video saying that your mission is to remind people that, quote, literacy is how we become the best possible humans in the world, through joy and through conversation. So thank you both for being here today, for joining us in conversation together about the possibilities of literacy, learning, and liberation. With that.
Bonjour, Anin. That's hello, and I see your light. My name is Allison Waka, and I have to introduce myself. My clans are Tatnazani and Awasa. I'm Menominee and Navajo, and I always like to acknowledge my parents, Mary Alice Sosi and Lawrence Waka. And welcome to Minnesota, the homeland of Dakota, Ojibwe, and Ho-Chunk peoples. And it's an honor to be up here this morning with you all and with Michael. I have to say it's been a real joy to meet you. And I've been following his social media for a long time now. And us in the library community are really proud and to have you as our narrator and our champion. So. We will have questions, Q&As, so just put your thinking caps on, and we'll start with a conversation here. So what is the role of libraries as places of learning and spaces for youth and family well-being?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It is my very first time in Minnesota outside of the airport, so I'm happy to be here for the very first time. Your guys' 70 degrees is totally different than California's 70 degrees. I should have packed a jacket. Now I know better. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this conversation. In case this is recorded, anyone who is blind or who needs accessibility sees this for posterity. I have a very frizzy afro. I have a colorful shirt, gray pants, and colorful shoes. I like colorful clothing. I like being out there. I've always loved, when I was a librarian, giving library kids an opportunity to make fun of me whenever possible, so that they wouldn't make fun of one another. I was like, I will take one for the team, for all these library kids. For your question, I think the library really is a space for families It is a place for the youth because it's a place where they can feel safe. I think that's the best part of the library. It represents every single person. Everybody has an opportunity to feel seen, to feel like they belong at the local library. I'm a person who's very open about libraries, about literacy, and most importantly, about mental health. I now know I am 34 years old. I've been suffering from mental health struggles since I was 8 years old. I had problems with anxiety, with depression. I'm now diagnosed with clinical depression, nightmare disorder, and panic disorder. So I have nightmares every night. I have panic attacks almost every single day. And Joy, the library, really helps me combat all those struggles. It's so incredible. And the library was a place where I always felt safe, where I always felt like I belonged. When I was struggling, when I had no friends, I made friends in Amelia Bedelia, in Henry Huggins, in Junie Bad and Bougie Jones, in Stanley Yelnats, in the Chronicles of Narnia. Bud Not Buddy is the first book I remember seeing a kid who looked like me in a character. And that's what the library always represented for me. And so I've tried to impact on library kids of today, on families. This is the space where you can be just as you are. I say you can come into the library and you can have panic attacks. I always tell library administrators and managers to plug their ears when I say that, because I'm not encouraging people to have a panic attack in the library, but it doesn't mean we're going to turn them away. We're going to find a way to help them. That's what the library represents. We have something for everybody. Yes, we are always going to be book pushers. We're always going to be library card pushers. But we have so much more now. We have musical instruments. We have board games. We even have video games, which a lot of library grown-ups don't like to hear, but we have them. They're a way to hook them into the library. We have digital resources. We have Hoopla. We have Canopy, which is like the Netflix of libraries. We have Libby by Overdrive. I was talking with some of you this morning about the importance of Libby, about audiobooks and ebooks, and how Libby is trying to be more and more accessible for library people, which is how they feel safe in the library. They have an actual dyslexic font for kids who are dyslexic, and not just kids, for adults too, because so many adults are reluctant readers because they never admitted that they don't know how to read. And Libby gives them a chance to say, here's a specialized font for the way that your brain works. Here's a way to speed up the speed of the audiobook. Some people listen to audiobooks, if you can believe it, at 3 times speed, 4 times speed. I don't know how they do it. I think their brains are superheroes to be able to listen to it that fast. But it is true, and that's all accessibility. That's all working for the library to be a space where these people belong. It's a place where unhoused people can come in and they can just be. You don't need a library card to enter the library. We want you to have a library card. We want everyone to get a library card. It's why I have one tattooed on my arm. But you don't have to have it. So often people will come into the library and they'll flash their card at me. They're like, here you go, Mr. Michael. And I'm like, buddy, this is not Costco. You do not have to show me the library card, but I am so proud of you. I'll show you mine if you want to see it. And it's really so special. There's so much more that we can do to make libraries better, but we're trying more and more. I had the unique opportunity to be invited to the White House several months ago and talk about accessibility with the likes of Haben Girma, who is the first lawyer who is deaf and blind to graduate from Harvard Law School, as well as Eric Harris, who played basketball, wheelchair basketball for Team USA. And just being able to talk about joy, but just being able to soak in their wisdom. It always reminds me, Haben Girma was talking about funding for accessibility, because libraries, we don't have a lot of ramps in libraries. So people in wheelchairs don't feel like they belong in libraries. They often can't fit through the shelves in order to check out books. And Haben was like, you know what, Michael, you can save so much money if you just turn off the lights, if you take away the chair. She's like, Michael, Eric has a wheelchair. He doesn't need your chairs in the library. You can save so much money if you just eliminate those chairs. And she's like, I am blind. I can't see you right now. If you turn off all the lights, your PG&E bill is going to go way, way down. And it's all these things about accessibility that we don't think about when it comes to funding about what we need. And that's how we make libraries better. Not funding for all the cool things, but the things that kids are like, really? I don't have to read books? I can go to the library for my video games, for all those other things, for my violin, for my guitar. It's like, no, this is to make sure that we have the best trained library people to insist that people belong in the library just as they are. They belong with their anxiety. They belong if they were in poverty, if they're middle class, if they're rich, whatever it is, a library is for every single person. It's to train these people to be a beacon, to be a representation of who they are. I was in Phoenix yesterday at a library conference, and someone got up and asked me, Michael, how do we get more library kids to become librarians? How do we convince more people of color to be library people?
Right. Yeah.
And I don't have all the answers, but I think it really is, it's just conversation. It's talking about the joys of the library, of all of us having a library story, of all of us having a story to share, all of our voices, we have so much power within us. It is a story, it is a budding story. Sometimes it's a written word, sometimes it's a spoken word. And it's showing these library kids that yes, you are capable of becoming a teacher, of becoming a firefighter, of becoming a librarian, of becoming an early literacy expert.
Right.
That is all possible. We have to say, here's where it is. It's very controversial in library land to say, you need a master's degree. And it is. I love that master's degree, but it hinders people of color from becoming a librarian because they cannot afford that degree. So that's why it's important that there's people with scholarships here to say, hey, how can we give these library kids scholarships? And that's what's possible, is that the library is possible for every single person, for every single family, to be the best possible version of themselves.
Oh, I love that. And yet, do not forget about libraries.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely. The next question is, say more about how literacy is the answer to liberation and how we become free, important, influential human beings. What is the spark you've seen people get from reading that you most value?
I mean, literacy is indeed the answer to liberation. Literacy is liberation. That's something from Children's Literacy Initiative in Philadelphia. They created that slogan. It just means that through literacy, we are the superheroes of the world. My Mount Rushmore of kindness is Mr. Rogers, Bob Ross, Steve Irwin, and LeVar Burton, with Dolly Parton as my honorary fifth member. And I really just think that like kindness, that's what it exudes. Kindness is literacy. Literacy is freedom. Us being the very best version of ourselves. We're so worried about literacy rates, about getting our kids to a third grade reading level. Teachers and grown-ups are panicking in kindergarten about how do I get them there? And it's like through joy.
Yeah.
That's my best part of that's my favorite part of seeing people become readers. It's just reading that story over and over again. If it's my favorite stories, I'm sure many of you are grown-ups. You're probably tired of Bluey. You're probably tired of Paw Patrol. But let them read those books over and over again. Let them memorize it. Let them fall in love. They're going to become literate. They're going to become the best version of themselves. They're going to love those books, and they're going to be forced to read more and more things. I love them realizing that every book is for somebody. Audiobooks count as real reading.
Yes.
Manga counts as real reading. Graphic novels count as real reading. That's why when we were all grown-ups, I think that I saw a baby earlier today, but most of us are grown-ups in this room. But we all grew up with picture books. We all love pictures and books. It's why I have all these tattoos on my arms. Pictures and books, they go hand in hand. That's how we eliminate reluctant readers. That's how we get to library joy. It's just letting people read for fun. It's not a chore. When we mirror, this is what you can do.
Exactly.
We get there, we become the best possible humans, all through reading. If it's sci-fi, if it's through thriller, if you're strange and you like sad books, if you like feeling sad when you read, that's okay, but it's possible. That's what matters, is read what you love. Don't be afraid to not finish a book. I know that's a controversial literacy take, but it is okay to put down a book. There are thousands and thousands of more books to read and be liberated through literacy.
Yeah, it took me quite a few years to realize I don't have to finish.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's a choice.
It
I
is
don't.
fast.
Yeah, it is. Especially someone like me that I feel the need to get completed, and
Got to mark off that good read.
right, the book it.
Yes. Got to get your free pizza for reading.
Right, exactly. And the next question: you advocate for the beauty of sharing and tending to our mental health and wellness. What is the connection between education, libraries, and our health and wellness?
You know what? In conversations that I've been having lately, I just found that all of those things weave together so nicely. I mean, libraries, literacy, mental health, wellness, they're all acting all together. They all collide in that same sanctuary, that same place that is a library building. I call it a sanctuary because even though it is a building, the library is everywhere. It's every single one of us. If it's a school library, if it's our neighborhood parks, it's our offices. I mean, think about literacy. I mean, you're all professional people. You're emailing every single day. You're probably sick and tired of emails. But you have to be literate to send off those emails, to read and respond to those emails. In the same place, same thing, in libraries and schools and businesses, we're all getting burnt out from the struggles of having to go to work every single day, from the various hardships of our jobs. And that causes a lot of mental health problems. It causes anxiety, it causes stress, it causes depression. But I think it all weaves together because we often think that mental health is an adult problem.
Right.
And it is a kid problem, it is a teen problem, it is an adult problem. It is an epidemic, it is a problem. It is happening everywhere to every single person. In the library world, I was a library person for almost 11 years. I encountered 7 kids under the age of 13 who indicated they no longer wanted to be alive in this world. I'm very happy to say that every single one of them are alive and they are all thriving. I'm very happy about that. Yes, absolutely. Cheer for people making it to tomorrow. But they shouldn't have had to feel that way. So it's like, how can the library, how can wellness, how can literacy, how can we as professionals find a way to give them resources so that they can get help,
Right.
so they can become teens who have help, so they can help the next generation and adults and so on. So I've always asked library kids, I just love saying, like, even when we're looking for books to read, where they're like, this is so hard, how am I gonna find a book to read? My parent says I have to read at a 3.4 AR level. And I'm like, you know what? There are so many books in this library. I feel anxious about it all the time. And just the power of saying the word anxious, like you can just see like the shackles fall off of them. They're like, this person, this librarian said anxious. I'm feeling anxious. I can actually talk to this
Naming
person about it. I can have a conversation. He's gonna listen. He's not gonna belittle me. And it's just being open. It's saying, yes, it is not fun to be mentally ill, but it is real. And the way that we move past is by talking about it, is admitting
Exactly.
that it's a real thing. But also, it's not the villain. Anxiety is not the villain. Depression is not the villain. How do we live with these things? I think it's through stories.
Yes.
It's through the library. It's through reading all these different books at different points in our life, but it's also embracing our own story, having the courage to write your story,
Yes.
to illustrate your story, to ask people for help in writing and illustrating your story. It's a group collaborative to get us mentally well and also to get us to thrive in life. And I think that's how they collide together. It took me a long time to figure that out, almost 30 years, but I'm doing the best I can. I think I'm getting closer and closer to the formula to be okay, to make it to tomorrow. It's always, we only have one day, and it's not like a YOLO thing. It's, how do I make it to tomorrow? How do I convince my friend? How do I convince my loved ones just to stay for one more day and to keep on going every 24-hour period?
Oh, thank you. It's to your point, there was a study done. This is kind of a little side note off
Please.
topic, but for natives, there was a study done out of California, actually, I believe, and it said that Native youth that know their creation story are 80% less likely to try to commit suicide.
Really?
And so you think about that, and the library is access to our creation stories. Unfortunately, our grandparents don't know them, and this is all. But the libraries do give access
Yes.
to tomorrow.
They do.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, you know what? And you know what's so important? I'm so glad you said that. I think for me, like people who look like you and I, people who look like people in this room, there was so long where we were forbidden to be literate, forbidden to have a library card. My grandmother unfortunately passed away about a month ago. She lived to be, thank you, but she lived to be 90 years old. Funniest, most wholesome, kindest person I've ever met. Super smart, but she wasn't allowed. She couldn't do it. So she came to California, and I say that because it's like what you're saying. It's such a privilege to be literate, to have a library card, to be able to do these things, and that's why it's important that we create a space. We create a library space, a library world, where people can see themselves in books, where they don't just like, it's not just words saying, yes, your story matters, please write it. It's saying, yes, I insist that you use your voice. It is your turn, it is your turn, it is your turn to tell your story, because so many of your ancestors didn't get a chance to. And I believe and I insist that you exist in libraries and in literature.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. So let's see, what number was I on here? Get me thinking here. What do you value about being a storyteller, a narrator of library stories? And why is it important to understanding of truth, discourse, and transformation in education?
Stories. I mean, stories are what transform education. I mean, I think we're going to be honored to hear from some more educators very, very soon. But the stories are transformative. It's what makes us who we are. It's how we make friends. It's how we establish all these relationships. If it's acquaintances in professional world, if it's best friends, if it's besties for the rest of our life. That's what we do. And I'm honored to be the narrator of Library Stories, of Library Joy, because of those library kids, those library grown-ups I encountered all the time, saying silly, zany things. Some of them would call me Afro Man because of my big, giant afro. And I'd be like, you guys know there's an actual Afro Man in the world. He's a rapper, right? Or they would call me a T-Rex because they're like, hey, they can't separate my afro from my skull. So they're like, Mr. Michael, you have a big giant dome. You got those long arms. And it's just who they are. It's just seeing those stories, seeing their hope. That's what's transformative, and that's why I'm honored to tell the stories of hope, of them saying, hey, I'm represented in this book.
Right.
That kid looks like me. It looks like the kid that I want to become friends with. And that's what brings me joy, is to see kids, to see grown-ups who didn't love the library, who didn't love being a library kid, love it for the very first time in their life and experience library joy.
Awesome. Amazing. So we can now jump to Q&A. Does anybody have any questions out there? Be brave. Come on up and ask Michael anything you'd like.
I think they have a couple of microphones behind you too, if you do.
Hi, Michael. Nice to meet you. Itai with the Carmel Hill Fund in New York. Ultimately, my question is, how do we make reading cool and accessible? And I ask that for two reasons. We're at a moment where, with all of the great work happening around the science of reading in schools, around instruction, kids are actually reading less books, right? They're reading more excerpts in the curriculum, but especially older kids, middle school kids, aren't given the choice of what books to sort of read in school.
Yeah.
And there's more competition with other things like devices, et cetera.
Sure.
So I'm curious, what would it take to make reading, to bring that joy and make it contagious and cool for young people today?
That's a great question. So nice to meet you. You know what I think it is? I think we are starting to do it already. I'm sure that would surprise you, but we are. And I think what it's taken is there's so many notable figures who are writing books. LeBron James is writing books. Steph Curry is writing books. You can tell I'm from California because the first two people I named are Californians. But also Malala is writing books. People, like you said, people who are indigenous are writing these stories. They're seeing these stories. Our heroes are giving them stories, and not just picture books. They're giving them chapter books. They're giving them comic books and graphic novels. They're saying, yes, like I said, graphic novels, real books, they count as real reading, and they're like, finally, my hero agrees. My hero says that too. So I think, honestly, letting them embrace those books, that's what it's going to take. It's also for the publishers to realize that we need these stories. We deserve these stories. So it's talking to the likes of Scholastic, of HarperCollins, of Penguin Random House, and saying, hey, I know that this has been your bread and butter for years and years, but this is how we get reading cool. This is how we attract new readers. Is focusing on giving them more and more books. Again, I've had so many wonderful conversations this morning. I've gone state to state this year, and I have discovered that there are in so many states, there are either not school libraries at all, they just don't exist, or if they do exist, they don't have a school librarian. They don't have a school library mediatek. And sometimes they'll bring a teacher into the library to be the librarian, which is no knock to the teachers. My mom is a teacher. I love teachers. They're doing the best they can, but they got into the school to do something else. You deserve a professional, a trained person in that school library. And of course, with the banned books problem going on, people taking away books, we have so many reluctant readers. And when you ban a book, you're saying, you know what, you're right, we don't want you to read. And you all know kids, they're going to be like, you're banning books? Guess what? The book you just banned, that's the one I was going to read. And I swear, that's what I was going to do. So I think that's important. And that's why I started something called the Library Afro-Revolution Day, where I started this mission in different libraries. In my former library, where people were kind enough to donate money to me, and I bought a bunch of books. I bought books with kids who have afros, who have twists, who have locks. who have no hair, who rock it hard like yourself, to be able to embrace themselves, to embrace it. You look very sharp. But you know what? But I think that's the whole joy. Even though it's called Library Afro Revolution Day, the focus is not on the Afro. It's just on making sure the kids feel seen. It's saying self-love. Those are the books I bought with the funds. And I said, here you go, kid. This is a free book. You don't have to pay a single dime. Take it home. It's not the library. You can keep it forever. You don't have to bring it back. I'm trying to go to more and more schools where these books are being banned and trying to donate as many books as possible to them so they can see themselves in books. Because when they see themselves, they're actually going to say, yes, you are not lying. This is how we do it. So, I mean, I think we're already there. I think, honestly, the group that we need to tell reading is cool is teenagers. I think pre-K through 4th grade, they're all about books. They're like, yes, Miss Rachel is writing books for me. I love this. I love dinosaurs. I love dogs. I love tractors. I love all these things. It's teens who we have to say, hey, you're not a nerd, even though I love being a book nerd. It's not a nerd anymore to love books. So it's how do we write more anime? How do we write more manga? How do we have conversations with the teens to say, what stories do you need? I think the problem with grown-ups is we have all these town halls with one another instead of saying, hey, teens, what would you like to read? Because they may be quiet, they may be introverted, but they want to talk about themselves. It's the first time sometimes that they feel heard. So we can make reading cool by listening and providing access to the books that all these kids and teens and grown-ups deserve.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I cried like 3 times during your
I'm so
conversation.
sorry.
And I wanted to thank you also, our moderator. I didn't catch your name, but I thought it was so beautiful the way that you named your parents and your origin. I see that so rarely. So I want to thank my parents for taking me to the library.
Yes.
Rick and Glenn, thank you so much. And so question for you, Michael. I'm also really active on social media, TikTok, Instagram, but I try to bring the positivity and the literacy and all that. But I sometimes get confused about, being on those platforms that are these sort of predatory corporate entities that steal attention and try to exploit the attention of young people that are so delicate and so alienated.
Yeah.
So I would just love advice or learn from you how you balance those things and make sure that you're creating a positive impact and maybe even moving people off those platforms, just anything about that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I love that you shouted out Rick and Glenn. Shout out to them indeed. And same for you. It makes me think of my own mom and dad. My mom homeschooled me from when I was in kindergarten all the way to being a senior in high school. Senior year is the only time I went to school. So my mom has always helped ground me. She usually calls me every day, but it's very early in California. So she has already texted me 7 times this morning saying, I hope it goes well, Michael.
Aww.
There you go. That's who my mom is. My dad worked very, very hard the entire time, so my mom could homeschool me and my siblings. I bring them up because they help keep me grounded. They're who I keep in mind when I'm on social media telling the stories. I'm like, how am I going to make my mom and dad proud? What would I say to myself that they would want to hear? How do I talk to the mentally ill version of me that my mom and dad tried to support all those years? I think being on social media it's so tough to handle. Library kids all the time ask me, how do I become a YouTube superstar like you? And I'm like, YouTube's the one thing I'm not on. Then I'm also just like, you know what? I always tell them, I'm like, just talk about what you love. As much as we love negativity, we love gossip. Libraries love tea more than anyone in the world. Drinking tea and gossip tea. Just talk about what you love. That's what I tell library kids. That's how you find your balance, is do it for yourself. If you love gardening, talk about gardening. If you love dogs, talk about dogs. If you like going to restaurants, if you're a foodie and you want to review all those restaurants, do what you have to do. If you're obsessed with Spider-Man, talk about Spider-Man all the time. I think that's the best way to stay balanced, is to love being on social media. Don't be afraid to take breaks from social media. You can stop for 2 weeks and you can keep on going. And I think that's what a lot of people forget from life and also from work. So I don't know if that helps you, but I think that's my advice in staying balanced, is just to make sure that it's something that you love. Social media is a job for so many people, but that's when it becomes toxic. That's when you dwell on the cyberbullying. That's when you're like, oh, these annoying comments, these trolls. It's so easy to be much more positive and to drown out those trolls if you just focus on your happiness, if you focus on your joy.
Hi, Michael. It's an honor to meet you. My name is Melissa, and I grew up as a library kid. My dad is a librarian.
Oh, love it.
Libraries are my safe space.
Nice.
My question for you is, when I think about teens especially, and I have 2 of them, I think about their need to connect with one another, especially after the pandemic. My kids say, yes, we have an online life, but we really want to just spend time with each other. How can books, have you seen good examples of how books or libraries provide kind of that way of connecting across, getting them to speak with one another?
You know what? I have actually. I think a lot of libraries will listen. I think more and more librarians are trying to actually have these conversations with teens and say, what do you need from our space? What would make it a safe place? What would make you want to be here? And I think that's the biggest thing, is having teen spaces, being able to say, yes, we've set aside a room for just teens. Adults can come in there very quickly to grab their YA book, but then they have to leave. This is a space for kids, and I think that's a big deal. Giving them cooking demonstrations. Teens love cooking. They love to do that, giving them anime workshops. A lot of libraries will buy Nintendo Switches and different things, and they'll have gaming days. The whole intent is so they can come together as a group, or they can also do things solo. I think that's the best way for libraries to find connections with teens, is just to have that safe space for them. And even also to try new things. I mean, my former library system, they would have punk rock shows in the parking lot of the library. And teens are like, we get to play our terrible music in your parking lot? That's so cool. Thank you so much. And so even if you don't like what they're doing, just letting them try it out, letting them see that they're like, oh, this is terrible, but at least you let me try as hard as I can. It really is. It's just listening to them. I mean, like I said to the other person, they will tell you what you need to hear. So give them that space. But even you can still use social media. Let them connect. One of my good friends is Blair Amani. She has a series called Smarter in Seconds. And she talks about things that are relevant to teens. Sometimes they're heavy in nature, and sometimes they're very silly and they're very zany. But she just delivers these 90-second little segments educating them, and they're like, oh, this is so cool. And I see them in the comments having these meetups on Discord chats on various servers saying, let's talk about this. So as much as you can use a library and other places as a place to connect in person, don't be afraid to try to get them to use technology and digital resources to also still do things in person, but to use those devices that they're obsessed with.
We have time, I think, for one more question.
All right. Good morning. Again, thank you for the conversation. As a dad, it reminds me to take my daughter to the library when I get home today. So last week I was at a convening, and Secretary Cardona lifted systems over superheroes as the way for reform. So the question that I have is, how do we clone you, right? So how do we ensure that library joy to a room of funders exists in those pockets across the country, and not just rest with the one superhero that you actually are?
You know what? I appreciate that. I wear a cardigan. I don't wear a superhero cape. But I say this is I tell people it's not being humble that I am not special. There are librarians here in Minnesota. There are librarians in Illinois, New York, California. They're doing exactly what I'm doing. I'm just very loud and annoying on social media. I'm willing to put myself out there. So I think the way that you see library joy is you go to these libraries. You have conversations with the librarians. You ask them what they need. You say, you know what, here we are in California. What do you need from us for funding? Here we are in Illinois. Here we are in Arkansas. Here we are in Arizona. It's going to be a different answer everywhere you go. So I think it's having those honest conversations. And honestly, though, I think it's already happening. I think people like me are starting to go up there. There are these library kids who want to be librarians. I met someone today who said that their kid wants to be a librarian. They actually voiced that out loud, that I want to be a librarian. There's a library kid last year who I love it. Their grown-ups sent me, they dressed as me for Halloween. They had their afro all sprawled out. They had their colorful LaCroix shirt on. They even made a Solano County Library badge that they put around their neck. So I think these kids are already wanting to become librarians just because they see that they belong, that they see that they're welcome. It's not because of me, it's because of their local librarians. They may see my videos, but they're like, hey, I got my library card from my children's librarian. This is my library card from the Minnesota Public Library, from the New York Public Library, from the Illinois Public Library, and it's happening everywhere. So really it's through conversations, it's for you being honest and saying, hey, here's what we can offer thus far. What would you use these services for? What is most important to you? And they'll let you know that it may be mental health resources, it may be staffing, it may be accessibility, but I guarantee you that they will talk your ear off until you are convinced that you are supporting and helping Library Joy with everything that you're doing, especially by taking your kids to the library.
Well, in close,
Please.
So it's our custom to give gifts, and so I do have a gift for you, traveling here. It's a book by Teresa Peterson, who's a Dakota author here in the state of Minnesota. I really love the book. Some sage and a button, too.
That's amazing.
Yes, our library.
Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you so much. I think I once had an elder tell us that, we become what we're taught. And I really want to say miigwech for teaching us about libraries and empowering us through joy.
Thank you.
And you are someone that I feel is very brave and very proud to have you in our library community.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, yeah, that means the absolute world to me. I cannot wait to read this. And with our final seconds, I would just like to leave you all with something I always say, that joy is always there for you. Every second of the day. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay if you're not ready for joy until tomorrow, even if you're not ready till 2025. I hope it finds you before that, but that's why I'm obsessed with Library Joy, with joy, because it's the one thing alongside the library that is always there for us whenever we're ready to seize it. So I hope you find your joy very, very soon, and I am honored to have had this conversation and to be here with you all today. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, another one.
Wow, it's bright up here. All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Abigail Selden. I have the privilege of being the Chief Growth Officer at Scholarship America. We are the largest administrator of private scholarships in the US and in the world. We give away about $300 million each year to 100,000 students across all 50 states. And I just love the way that conversation handed off to our panel. I think often, this library joy concept that Michael talked about, I think is such a positive way for us to be moving into this conversation about what can we do from a growth mindset. How can we be happy? How can we be positive? And how can we take joy in the things that are working and the differences that we in our communities are all making? And Allison, I'm looking for you, but what you said about access to tomorrow, I think is so essential, because that's really what I think we're all talking about here today, is how do we provide access to tomorrow? How do we provide inclusion? That's what I love about scholarships, is that it's a way of inviting folks in. It's a way of saying, you're welcome. We are excited to have you. And we're excited to have you in particular in higher education. And when you think about it, attending higher education is an act of faith. It's a choice. It's a belief that by going into higher education, by attending school, whether it's a career college or community college, a four-year institution, graduate school, it's based on a belief that the system is going to work for you. And it's going to work for your family. It's going to work for your community. And that it's worth it. And that depends really on all of us to make sure that we help those institutions deliver on the faith that our students have in them, and that all of that is a core contributing factor to whether or not we get to have this thriving democracy that we're all here to talk about, and that education is really a critical pillar of. So I'm thrilled to be joined by an amazing group of leaders today who will start lining up next to the stage now. Thank you so much. And to help us continue this conversation. And really to help us continue this conversation about the role of philanthropy in making sure we deliver on the belief and the faith that our students have in us and in our institutions. So first, I want to welcome Shantae Joseph, Head of Employee Engagement and Strategic Enablement at Wells Fargo. Lindsay Kedzef, VP of Social Responsibility at United Health Foundation. Oh, I'm doing this out of order. All right. Also, Scott Jenkins, Strategy Director at the Lumina Foundation. Tracy Bird, Minnesota Teacher of the Year for Minneapolis Public Schools. And Dr. Walter Kimbrough, President of Talladega College. We're very cozy up here, so we're going to try to have a very cozy conversation. All right. So as we go through the first round of questions, if you guys want to add also a little bit about who you are and what you bring to this conversation, I think that would be just wonderful for our audience, who we can't see, but we know you're there. So first and foremost, we're really here to talk about how philanthropy and our North Star in higher education and education more broadly. But what I think that really means is, how is the work that we do going to help make people's lives better? How is it going to increase access to opportunity? And so would love if each of you would take that on and talk about your work and how you see it in that framework. Shantae?
I knew she was going to do that.
She did.
But thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So, Shantae with Wells Fargo, and who I am as a person, I'm a mom of 4 adults, and I'm also an Air Force veteran. I'm a wife of 29 years. I have 2 grandchildren. That's who I am. What I do for a living is, with Wells Fargo, is invest in scholarships. I lead our strategic investments across 9 different nonprofit organizations that are focused on education and skills-based hiring. And as I think about your question of how the work that not only I have a privilege to do today, but that we're doing as an organization leads to that North Star, it literally is about a corporate entity that decided over 20 years ago that they were going to do something different, which is invest in education, which we already know is a divide for us across all of our diverse segments, including people with disabilities, veterans such as myself, emergency grants, and for our employees. And the way I see it is, as we do this work, it really is giving students an opportunity to be able to not have to be in debt to go to school. It's about access. And on the back end of that, a few years ago, now it's also about employment opportunities, which I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to lean into that later.
Wonderful, thank you. My name is Lindsay Kedzef. I am with United Health Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of United Health Group. And I have the great pleasure of leading our Diversity in Healthcare Scholarship Program. This is our largest philanthropic program that we have announced, and so we have a goal of investing in 10,000 students by 2023 to help diversify the healthcare workforce. And so we're really at this intersection of where education and healthcare come together, and how can we prepare and inspire historically underrepresented students to pursue clinical careers and help diversify the healthcare workforce so that we can serve the population better. So I know we'll get into a lot more, but I'm happy to be here, and thank you.
Good morning. My name is Scott Jenkins, and I like the way you opened the question. So I'm the grandson of a sharecropper from Live Oak, Florida. I'm the son of a rocket engineer that worked for NASA, and I'm the father and stepfather of 3 wonderful children. I have always looked at our work from Lumina as that education and higher education is kind of human liberation, and what it does is provides people with prosperity, choices, and time. And the time is really important, because when you have time, you can join your daughter's soccer coach. You can join the Rotary. You can be involved in civic activities. So at Lumina, we really believe that civic activity is as important as higher education credentialing. And the people that are working in the arena that I'm really inspired by probably are not really well known. The people that run higher education systems in states like Aaron Thompson in Kentucky, Ginger Ostro in Illinois, our friend Dennis Olson here in Minnesota, every single day show up with their team to try and create systems that are more equitable for all students and to get them to kind of prosperity and give them that time that they can be more actively engaged. And so I really have a great deal of admiration for people who tend to work with both the noble and the profane to get good work done in policy. And thank you.
Hi, my name is Tracy Bird. I am fortunate enough to be named Minnesota's Teacher of the Year for 2024. I teach 9th grade English at Minneapolis Washburn. I've coached football for about 20 years. I'm the head track coach. You can find me sometimes working the scoreboard. My thing is like the kids need role models. They need adults to show them how to navigate what's going on. My job is plain and simple. I'm the boots on the ground trying to help them step into their greatness, be the better version of themselves, understand the power that their voice holds and how to speak truth to power. So I am happy to be here. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Walter Kimbrough, and I'm a narrator of HBCU stories. No, I like how you said that, so that's why I'm going to take that. I like that a lot. So, see, y'all supposed to be paying attention. That's what he said. Okay, let's put it all together. I am presently serving as the interim president of Talladega College in Alabama and have served as an HBCU president. I was first named the president 20 years ago, October 22nd. So I was 37 when I became a president. I've been in this space a long time. And what I think about the work that I do is really serving under-resourced people with institutions that are also under-resourced. And that creates a huge challenge for us in the work that we do, and how do we have equity to address those issues. For example, yesterday it was reported that last year, Harvard University's endowment went to $53 billion. They amassed a 10% increase last year, which was equivalent to $2.5 billion. There are over 100 HBCUs, go back to 1837. Collectively, they have about 10,000 plus years of lifetime experience. In 1 year, Harvard University raised as much as half of what those institutions have raised in over 10,000 years. The total endowment of HBCUs is about $5 billion. They did half of that in 1 year. And we still have ways that we're still funding institutions that already have so much, when the institutions that are doing the real work that serve people who look like America still don't have the resources that they need. And that becomes a challenge that I see on a day-to-day basis. Institutions where 2/3 of the students are Pell Grant eligible, a lot of still first-generation students. And that's the challenge that we keep trying to figure out every day. How do we get people to focus on those institutions that are working with the emerging America to have the resources that they need to do that kind of work? And so that's why I do what I do.
Dr. Kimbrough, I love what you said about resources in particular, and the inequitable distribution of resources, but also the creativity that you've brought to resource engagement and resource capture in your role leading these universities. You know, I know it's a little unconventional to go across the row again, but one of the things that I love about this panel, this group of leaders that I'm privileged to have this conversation with this morning, is that you are all already working across sectors. And you're all already looking at ways to pull resources together and to pull unexpected actors or alliances together. So, you know, would love to ask the group again, and I'll volunteer, I guess, in order. You know, what is most important to you that you're seeing out there, either in your own work or out in the field, in terms of a cross-sector collaboration or estranged bedfellows? Tracy, I'd love to have you start.
I'll start. The first thing I've found, as Michael was saying, some of the students are suffering right now with mental illness, and it's one of those things where I have to let them know, you're enough already.
Yes.
Everyone just relax and just breathe. You have within you the greatness to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. So just breathe, just relax. Now what we need to do is step our game up, because I lived, I'm 53, so the way I was taught and the way I see life is different from the way they're gonna see life in another 40 years. So the challenge becomes, how do we get them ready for a job that doesn't even exist yet, and what skills will they need? And the great equalizer is just become a good human, be able to communicate with other people. It's not necessarily a skill set that you need to have, but a willingness to learn, a willingness to speak, and a willingness to grow. And so we do that in the 9th grade classroom using English.
Shantae, as you look across, you are already working cross-sector, coming from Wells Fargo, and also bringing so much of your experience from the military and now working in scholarships. What comes to mind for you as you think about cross-sector work?
A lot. So a lot comes to mind from, not only from the work that I do, but more from the passion that I have too. And when I think about, what you said about the HBCUs and the severe lack of funding, I think about some of the work that we are standing up now as we think about, as Wells Fargo saying, let's have an HBCU strategy, right? And sometimes we as corporate partners decide to create in a silo, right? But right now what we've done is pause to say, we need to talk to the HBCU presidents to say, what do you need? What does that investment look like? And so that's something that we're started. Now we're technically in year 2, right? Because it takes time to do things at a very large organization. Personally, what excites me is the fact that conversations are now happening, right? To do something different, right? We don't compare, we're not comparing ourselves to other partners, but to think about what is that investment? So initially you may think, oh, well, scholarships, wraparound services, student programs is enough. No, it's not enough, because the school itself needs dorms. The school itself needs investment in a technology center. What does that look like? The endowments are also very, very important. And so what I'm hoping to see evolve over the next 12 months to 18 months is that type of work, to step out there and think about investments in a different way. And then at the same time, as we focus on our HBCUs, I have the privilege to look across all of our segments, and you know that,
yes.
And working so closely with us, and working with the CEOs of all of these scholarship fund organizations and getting on the ground exposure to those scholars. There are needs across each of our segments that you think, oh, I didn't realize that you struggle with that too, right? And so that's where, with the work that I'm doing, I get to have those conversations. Okay, so what do we need to do, right, to bring us together in one room, right? We do the annual convening with our partners, but some of the one we're planning for next year is now we need to bring our scholars together, because to your point, they're the future, right? So they need to be in a room together to understand each other, understand each other's community, and what they're going to do in the future, right? To help be able to sustain even themselves within their own network. So, yeah.
Allison, this is something that in particular I think you see from your seat at United Health Foundation and also United Health Group, and you guys bringing together as well the healthcare industry with education. So, like Shantae, you're really leading this cross-sector work just, every day. But, what comes to mind for you as you think about cross-sector?
Yeah, and I really want to answer that question, and I want to pull on something Tracy said. We recently brought a scholar to present to our board, and something they said has stuck with me, and something you said remembers it. And he said, we're trying the best we can. And so these are med students faced with so many challenges, many of them first generation. And then he went on to say that having a scholarship is like having your own personal cheerleader. And so we're not naive to the fact that like our scholarship dollars are not providing a full ride. We can't support every expense that they have, but I think there's a huge component, potentially a mental health component, for people to feel like they're not alone, for people to feel like they have a huge organization like United Health Group that believes in them, that wants to support them and their outcomes. So. But as far as cross-sector goes, I mean, healthcare and education, what we want to accomplish in healthcare, we can't do without education. We're on a mission to create, we focus on health equity. Everything we talk about is health equity focused. And we can't do that without supporting clinicians from historically underrepresented backgrounds to be able to execute that work. And so when we launched this large program, $100 million investment over 10 years to support 10,000 students, we really looked at some of the gaps that were missing across the sector. And so what we found was a lot of scholarships supporting more of your traditional students per se. So people who may be in an undergrad or a graduate program wanting to become a nurse, a physician, a pharmacist. Where we found a gap that we are really excited about investing in is people that are already in the workforce. So who is already doing the work today that may just want to advance their credentials, that may want to get a certificate in mental health, maternal health. And so many of our students want to go back to the communities that they came from, and that's what really excites us. Michael, I was listening to your conversation, and so much of what you said resonated with what we're trying to do in a completely different realm, but making sure that we're preparing the future and bettering the healthcare system, because people want to receive care from people who are like them, and that like can be a lot of different things. But just really trying to diversify that healthcare workforce and finding those gaps. I mean, that's what we really strive to do. That's what we partner with Scholarship America on. It's unique in the space, and we've had such great success, and just excited to see what we do over the next 10 years.
And I think that really ties into this access to tomorrow thing, not just for our students, but also for the communities that then they go to serve. For that library kid who grows up to be a librarian, for that clinician who goes back to work in the community they came from with new skills and hopefully a lot less student debt than they would have had otherwise, and that personal cheerleader. A point of privilege as a moderator, we actually do see evidence that students who have their financial stress reduced do have better mental health. It's intuitive. Somebody had to do a study to prove it, but that's something that, we see. And so the personal cheerleader thing, I think, is real and goes back to this issue of bringing people in and helping them to feel included and that they're wanted here in this thriving democracy in our institutions. Dr. Kimbrough, I'm curious if you could share your thoughts also about this cross-sector question, and what have you seen be most helpful for you and the schools that you've led, or is most exciting that you see out there in the field?
Right. Well, I think one of the most important things that we can do, particularly in the HBCU space, and we talk a lot about, we need to tell our stories. And I argue that, no, we need to be able to tell compelling stories that cause people to act in ways that they might not normally act. And that sometimes is very difficult, but you can create some unique partnerships based on the quality of the story that you tell. For years, I've been one of the people who've railed against U.S. News and World Report best colleges rankings. I think they're horrible. And for years and years, I've been writing about those rankings. And so we're coming out of the pandemic in 2021. I got an email, and it says, "Hi, my name is Malcolm Gladwell." And I'm like, dude, I know who you are. You ain't got to do all of that. But he wants to interview me for his podcast to talk about rankings, because he also has an issue with rankings. So we do this interview, we have a great conversation, and he comes back later, he says, "Look, I'm vaccinated, I want to come to New Orleans." I'm like, come to New Orleans, let's have more conversation, talk to students. So it ended up becoming a 2-part podcast episode for his revisionist history, where he talked about rankings, and then the second one is called Project Dillard. And as a part of Project Dillard, he got with a group of students from Reed in Oregon, and they basically sort of broke into the metrics as to how U.S. News does the rankings. And they figured out that Dillard, if you look at national liberal arts institutions, because we had a lot of low-income students and first-generation students, that we would have been in that bottom quarter. But if we had rejected more students, so we only had the top ACT scores, if we had more wealthy students, more white students, and added $1 billion to our endowment, we would immediately jump into the top 10 of national liberal arts institutions. Immediately. And just having those kind of conversations, and so we started even having deeper conversations because I told him that we were able to substantially improve our retention rates because the #1 factor for our students not coming back was not average high school GPA or ACT score, it was unmet financial need. And when we created a small program to address that, we saw our retention and graduation rates jump up 20 points. And I said, what if we could come up with a way to make this a larger program? So we were having that conversation, and then I left Dillard, so I got to go back to him when I end up somewhere permanent to say, hey, remember that conversation we had? But what happened is because he kept telling that story, and not just on the podcast, he was doing other interviews and talking about this. We started getting random checks from people that we didn't know because they heard about Dillard University and Malcolm Gladwell. I was with my son who plays AAU basketball. We were in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I had on a blue Dillard polo. We're in the elevator, and there's a woman who looks at me. She was like, oh, Dillard University. Yeah, I heard Malcolm Gladwell talk. It's like 2 years afterwards, I still had people talking to me about that. So that became a partnership where you have now someone else with a much larger platform talking about the work that you're doing and how meaningful that is. So that was just a great opportunity, but part of that was on us to start being able to tell a story that was compelling enough to get his attention for him to say, wow, this is really a great story, and I believe in the work that they're doing. So we always are looking for partners and champions to really help us tell our story and then to cause people to act based on that story.
I love the juxtaposition of that on the one hand, these completion scholarships and this generosity of giving students what they need in terms of resources, and that making a national story.
Yep.
And then on the other hand, the valor that we give these US News rankings, which are based on the opposite premise.
Right.
They're based on rejection. It's the opposite of what we're talking about here today. It's the opposite of access to tomorrow and of calling people in and of making it accessible. And so I think that's just so incredible. You know, we also at Scholarship America get random checks in the mail, and it's disturbing from a revenue prediction standpoint as someone who leads development, but I think really speaks to the way education inspires people. And they're not in it for the recognition. They're in it to make a difference too, and that's just so special. Scott, I want to wrap up this question with you, and though I feel like I'm cheating because I've had the privilege of working with you and your colleagues at Lumina on Head Start and community college and bus stops at community college, but you know, how are you guys thinking about this, especially moving forward, about cross-sector collaboration?
Yeah, it's, so our strategic plan that we issue every 4 or 5 years is, in a lot of cases for those of us who lead our policy work or our practice work, is really a user guide. And what we do lean into is a vision for an equitable system where, regardless of your background or your race or your social class, that your outcomes are no different than anyone else's. And what we continue to argue is that the things that you hear across here in K-12 higher education healthcare and the inequitable outcomes is not a bug. It is a feature in the system built over the last 140 years of policy decisions that are made incrementally and over time. And what we do in the policy realm is we have that vision, and then we build a reparation mindset of how do we take policy and how do we repair it and make it work better. And in order to do that, you may be familiar with Guy Ritchie. He's a director, and one of his conceits that he does is that he projects into the future a plan of how things are going to work. And I'll say to the funders out there, sometimes we project what the plan is and how it's going to all unroll and how it's going to be perfectly worked out. And we're usually right about at step 1. We might get to step 1 or 2. And what I would say on the cross-sector side is, unless you have built the coalitions, the partners, the people who will tell you your breath stinks on your work, then you're going to have a hard time getting past step 1 in your plan to solve things. And so having that cross-sector collaboration, though, also isn't just limited to outside partners, so your intermediaries, your advocacy organizations, your policymakers. It's also internal to your organizations, because those of us who argue that we should be more front-facing on policy also need to get through our comms folks to deal with reputational risk. We need to get through our legal folks to deal with IRS guidelines, and we need to get through our boards and our executive teams to make sure that they're in agreement. And so what does that look like down the road? You cannot get there without understanding that these people need to be co-collaborators with you and co-conspirators with you to make sure that you can get your work to move forward.
I think that's a great way to feed into this next question. I promise he's not a plant. So as we think about, what's coming and what your visions are as we look ahead, what's your call to action for this group? And you can make it near term or you can make it long term, but I'm curious if anybody's got a call to action of something that you want folks to go home and do today, or go home to do early next week after they've gotten over the cold that they'll catch on the plane, leaving Grantmakers from Education, which was worth it. We've all had a great time. But what's a call to action for next week, and maybe what's a call to action as we look to the future? I'll take a volunteer for this one, because I know it's a little broader.
I'll jump.
Thank you.
I'll jump. The biggest thing is working with state legislators. Funding public schools is the way to make sure that we create citizenry. Like, that's what we do inside of school. To make sure that that works effectively is to have it properly funded. So if you're working with your state legislator to make sure that the funds are coming in and there's no surprise, like we know this is coming in, that's a big thing. Partnering with schools, we can't train a workforce. I can only teach them to think critically. So if you create drones, and we have people that love to fly drones, if you create some type of program where students are coming in, whether it's an internship, paid or unpaid, you guys work that out. But it starts with the legislator to make sure that funds are coming in, and then it's how creative can you be with our students outside of that.
So I was thinking this morning of this question. I was reminded of a quote from Marcus Aurelius, who said, "The impediments to action advance action. What stands in the way becomes the way." So basically, the obstacle becomes the way. And as we think of our work, if you have obstacles that are being thrown up in front of you, then that's the way, because the people who are defending the system as it is are the people who aren't standing side beside you and shoulder to shoulder with you, and you have to move through that obstacle, and you have to find a way. And that obstacle means that you're going in the right direction. And so working with your coalitions and your groups and your others, and actually coming at it humbly with that obstacle to understand where they're coming from and how you can work with them, then becomes the way.
I love that, and I want to pull on that too, and I think we can maybe tell there's some funders here on this side of the panel, but I think so often, and I'll just speak for myself, that as funders, especially from large corporations, we get so bogged down, or we can get so bogged down in what we think is right, and Shantae alluded to this too, and we think we know the answer. And so what I try to do for myself is just, we don't have the answers. We might have the funds, but we truly need to be partners with individuals that do have the answers, that are in this work every day. And so that is my hope, and I think that spans all across philanthropy as a whole, that we as funders try to kind of reconcile this imbalance between funders and the people on the ground doing the work. And so that, we can talk about that a lot another day. But the other thing that I really try to do is, as a corporate funder, I try to remember about the student when we're making decisions. At the end of the day, that's who we're supporting. And so in whatever work you are in, it's so easy to get bogged down in board meetings and this and that, and we're impacting lives. And so when I get distracted, or when I'm feeling like, ooh, I don't know what to do next, or I run into that obstacle, just like, it sounds so simple, but keeping that student at the forefront of those decisions, I think just, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. There's two that I would, and I'm glad we went in that order, because what I like about it is the reminder today of where it starts, which is in elementary school, middle school, high school. So thank you for that. So there's two call to actions. One would be for as a funder, as a corporate partner, to continue to drive the message forward about how we had this conversation, philanthropy to business business imperative. And it's a different way of thinking about philanthropy. It's a different way of connecting the two. It does two things. One, it keeps it relevant. It keeps you from constantly having to go defend to get the dollars when you tie it to the business outcome. So when you think about, obviously at Wells Fargo, our customers are diverse in thought, race, and ethnicity. So therefore, those that we serve are diverse. So when you think about the business that we are a bank. And I was joking earlier, I have to remind people that you do know you work at a bank, right? So there's business outcomes that we have to drive for. There's strategies we're trying to hit that we do. We have a board of directors, et cetera. But when you think about what we're trying to accomplish as a business, our philanthropy ties right to that. Right? And so continuing to drive that message, remind our business leaders internally and externally, our partners, our nonprofit partners, of the same thing of what we're trying to do, then it becomes a mutually beneficial partnership. It becomes a true partnership to think about, okay, where should we put these dollars? Because we don't know everything, like what I told you earlier, how we wanted to create this great HBCU strategy. I'm like, I think we missed the mark on that. So now going to the experts to say, where should we be? Where do you need us to be? Where does it make sense to do those dollars? So that's one call to action to continue those conversations. On the other side, to your point, it is about the student. And so when even for myself and my colleagues and our other executives and those that are deeper in the organization, we have to show up. Right? And one of the things that I talk about a lot with our partners is we have an opportunity to get out of our chair. If you're an executive, you have an accountability to get up and show up for these students. They need to understand and see, yes, we're giving dollars, but then who looks like me at your corporation? What do you do? How do you do it? How did you get there? So they can see, okay, I can see where I can go. And that's at all levels of the organization. So those are my two.
And I love that, and I think that gets, I'm going to keep coming back to this access to tomorrow thing that I think is so evocative, but increasingly we see, and Wells Fargo's been partnering on this with us as well, but folks attaching, when they set up scholarships with us, paid internships for students at those same corporations, and really thinking through that full pipeline. And that's always been so heartening to us. We operate 1,350 unique programs. Not all of them have paid internships, but over time, we expect many more of them will. And that's important for dealing students in and for showing them that their faith in the system is justified and that we're going to deliver. Dr. Kimbrough?
So quickly, I'll start with long-term, and I want to piggyback on what Tracy talked about in terms of how do we get folks who are lawmakers to think very differently? How do we change the paradigm? So how do we go from thinking of education as a private good back to education as a public good? The example I always use is that when Ronald Reagan became governor of California, he fought with the UC system a lot and started having these conversations about, well, education is a private good. He federalized that idea when he became president of the United States. And so now, as we've seen, as the country has become much more diverse, but lawmakers still look the same way, there are people who will openly say, well, those kids don't need education. So if you look at the demographics of public school in America, it looks nothing like the U.S. Senate. But those are folks who will have to make decisions about where you get this additional funding. So we've got to really put more pressure to say, how do we return to the idea of education being a public good rather than a private good? Immediately, my request is always to make sure we're looking to provide support for those institutions that often receive no support. I became the interim president of Talladega on June 26. And I run into a building that's completely on fire, falling down. My wife is a graduate, so when they called me, she was like, that's my school, you have to go. So she kicked me out of the house and said, go. And so I said I'd be there for a year. It's just amazing because you have an institution that has been around 157 years with an endowment that's only $2.5 million. And you just have these bills that they have just not been able to pay. The students haven't been able to pay. And I'm trying to figure out, how do I pull all these things together? And a lot of times foundations and corporations don't look at those schools like that because they're like, oh, well, this is just some little bitty school between Atlanta and Birmingham nobody knows anything about. So, but we're seeing schools like that have the potential of closing, and that becomes a challenge. So it's really just to get people to start thinking differently about who we fund and what kind of resources they need, and to really have that kind of sort of Mackenzie Scott idea where you just say, this is what I'm funding, you know what you need best. I'm gonna let you do what you need with that funding. And we received Mackenzie Scott funding at Dillard University, and it provided great resources for us to be able to do that. So that's the immediate. But I think long term, we have to have that conversation. We've got to figure out how do we get this nation to start thinking again as education as a public good and not just education for those kids. And if it's those kids, we can just give them less.
Can I just tag on?
Yes, go for it.
And what you're saying, how can we get them to honor somebody else's child? Because you're going to do everything you can for your child.
Yeah.
But now you've got to say, how do I honor that person's child? How do I honor that person's child? And then can we shift it?
And I think that gets back to something Dr. Kimbrough said in his first answer, which is the stories we tell. They matter, and to whom we tell them, as Tracy said, to state legislators, to everybody else. That matters a lot too. You know, who hears them, who's ready to listen, and who's maybe not ready to listen, but we're going to be creative about finding a way to get in front of them anyway. I want to thank this amazing panel, and I want to thank this incredible audience who stayed with us for the third day of this tremendous conference, and Nicole and the tremendous group of people who organized this undertaking. It's been such a beautiful, smooth experience, I think, for all of us, and one that at least leaves me more hopeful and thinking about joy and thinking about access to tomorrow, and I think with a very concrete set of actions that we can all go forward with and plans to make, including plans to vote. And with that, I think we'll get off the stage.
So good morning, everyone. How y'all doing? So, well, I'm going to follow a few themes before I get started. First of all, I am also, Michael, a proud library kid. I lived in the library my whole childhood, and I loved it. I still do. I also want to follow the license given by what other people did to give a shout out to my family. My mother, who died at age 105, but was a leader of Rosenwald schools in Mississippi. And if you don't know the history of the Rosenwald schools in Mississippi, you don't know the history of this nation. Just saying. Nicole asked if I would bring us to the near end of this conference by trying to synthesize what I have heard over these past 3 days. And I'm just one person, so what I heard is what I heard. So I don't want to offend anybody if your favorite, session doesn't get represented in this feeble attempt. I also want to say, some of you know why I wrote this at 2 a.m. And those of you who don't, it is because those receptions, some particular receptions became parties, became after parties, and some of us didn't know how to leave despite our assignments. But I'm just going to say all that to you because if you'll bear with, I have notes from which I like to speak extemporaneously normally, but I'm going to read so I can get through this. So we came together with a common purpose, and that was to discuss, imagine, and confront perhaps even long-held notions, and explore afresh what Dr. McGuire raised on day one, which is what is the purpose of education? Is it performance management or to support civic engagement and democracy? Then through various workshops, we heard that education for a thriving democracy can encompass a multiplicity of ideas and actions, collectively empowering both children and adults to participate in democratic processes and contribute to the common good. We affirmed that civic knowledge and literacy are imperatives for the healthy future of society, and that we can invest in a variety of ways to foster a robust understanding of democratic principles and persons' rights, as well as the role of all who reside here in shaping public policy. We affirmed that all that promotes children and youth's critical thinking and ability to engage in public discourse, both directly and indirectly, contributes to the practice of democracy. That as we seek to protect and preserve democracy, we must understand the relevance of all students' access to quality education, regardless of their socioeconomic background, race, gender, or ability. That while we urgently need organizations that are specifically focused on civic education and the promotion of democracy, we all can, and perhaps we must, think of our various ways of investing in education as another means of contributing. As we invest in education that fosters analytic skills and children and usability to question, debate, understand, and deal with big emotions, and engage with complex societal issues, as we encourage informed decision-making and responsible civic engagement, as we invest in social and emotional learning and teaching empathy, collaboration, and communication, helping students to value differing perspectives and shared work toward common goals, we are all contributing to a healthy democracy. And yet, without contradiction, we do see the need for specific investment in civic education and children's understanding of the power of collective action. We took a moment to understand the importance of youth and adults' ability to ingest media and critically assess digital platforms, and to distinguish fact from misinformation. And I might add, whatever inspires our communities and children's historical and cultural understanding is critical as well. Finding ways to teach about our ancestors' historical struggles for democracy and justice, enabling teaching about movements and the struggle for justice across the land that have resulted in enduring change. These are all things that were touched upon in the workshops I attended as important elements of education for a thriving democracy. Also, if we can foster our own ability to understand diverse cultural perspectives and experiences within a democracy, we're all contributing. Now, I want to try something. I asked my staff if they thought this was fly or die. They said, go for it, but you know. So I'm a church girl, too. I am also Reverend Sneed. So there's a little something that we do in church. It's called call and response. Okay, and so I'm going to try something on where I'm going to pose a question to you, and if your answer is yes, I am, you're going to stand and you're going to call out real loud, yes, I am. So if I said, for instance, are you a dog lover? And your answer was, yes, I am, then you're going to stand and you're going to say real loud and proud, yes, I am. So let's try it. Are you an investor in democracy? Oh, Lord Jesus, we need help. Are you a contributor to democracy? Are you a visionary who believes we can have in this country an education that advances a thriving democracy? Well, then our work at this conference is done, and thank you for my standing ovation.
Thank you, Sarah. That was lovely. This has indeed been a phenomenal conference, and please give yourselves a round of applause, as we just did Sarah and all of our panelists today. I've heard such deep and thoughtful and generative exchanges over the past couple of days in plenary sessions, in breakout sessions, at receptions, at lunches, around this theme that we've endeavored upon at this time. And one of the things that's really stood out for me is the call for philanthropic leadership in education to be adaptive to be persistent, expansive, and rooted simultaneously, to be astute, to listen, to have a sense of historical awareness while also being future-facing, and to be gutsier in that way. So I hope that you'll all continue the conversations that matter that we've had it this week back home with your friends and colleagues and peers who weren't here, and with each other, and really also think about ways in which those convert into action. This is the time in the program where we usually say, join us next year in X city on these dates, and we'll do that in a moment. But we actually have something a little bit more special to share. So Grantmakers for Education is turning 30 next year. 3 decades ago, when a group of friends and colleagues dreamed up this organization called Grantmakers for Education in 1995 and probably a bit before. We're celebrating this next year, and we'll honor the members who are part of that founding group, their influence, their impact, and everyone that they've kind of brought along over the past 30 years. We'll do that. There'll definitely be, not to miss events and lots of opportunities to engage in that. Lots of our highly anticipated types of programming and publications. We'll do all of that. And certainly we'll celebrate again at next year's conference. But we're going to actually start today. So we want to acknowledge those who were there from the very beginning, forming and steering the development of this organization, and as many would argue, the field. And so I'm really excited, and on behalf of all of us at EdFunders, to share that we're launching today the Ignited Awards, a recognition of champions and changemakers in education philanthropy. These awards acknowledge principled leadership that has cultivated and ignited bold ideas in service of all learners. By launching the award this year, with intentions for it to grow and evolve in the future, we hope to create a collection of outstanding examples of influence and impact in education. So it's our great pleasure to announce the inaugural award recipients. And before Sarah does, let me also ask a couple of our friends and colleagues and family members who are here to also join us on stage to help with this honor. So please come Charmaine, Fred, Sheetal, and Nathan to the stage.
I said to a certain person this morning, and now he'll know what I was talking about, you fooled me once. But here it is again. This means something to him. It is my tremendous honor to announce that the first recipients of the Grantmakers for Education EdFunders Ignite Ed Award are, can I get a drum roll? Come on, y'all, because we don't have any music. Kent McGuire. Kent McGuire. Ken McGuire and Marla Chap. Everyone, it is my tremendous honor and it is my privilege to stand before you as we celebrate and pay tribute to these leaders who have shaped the landscape of education and education philanthropy and enriched the lives of so many. Through this small token of affection, we want to honor giants in our field, mentors, scholars, and steadfast advocates for education justice and equity. Their work has left an indelible mark on the field of education philanthropy through their visionary approaches and deep understanding of the systemic barriers facing students, educators, and communities, and their championing countless transformative initiatives that have expanded opportunity and access where it was most needed. For both of them, their influence extends far beyond that of a philanthropic leader. They have fostered partnerships, built coalitions, and ignited change in ways that will resonate for generations. I stand in the stead of dozens of others who love and appreciate Kent and Marla.
So y'all can stay there for a moment, just for a moment. Your friends are up here, and we've invited them to share and shower and give you your flowers as part of this recognition. So I'll turn it over to Sheetal and Nathan
Great.
first.
Thank you, Nicole. And I'm so excited to be here. I'm a little giddy, and I love surprises. So Marla, surprise. It was hard to keep this from you last night. I'm super honored and thrilled to be sitting here to honor Marla. She's given and continues to give so much to our community education policy and philanthropy, whether as a public servant in the New Jersey governor's office years ago, or as a district redesign and a director at the Annenberg Institute for School Reform, or as a senior program officer at the Rockefeller Foundation. She's always been deeply committed to our students and communities. The field, whether it's community organizers, teachers, district leaders, CBOs, former staff, we've all felt her commitment for decades. When she moved over to the teacher side of things at the American Federation of Teachers, she continued this commitment as her North Star. I was fortunate to be one of her first hires and to be able to contribute to her vision. From my first interview with her in January 2012, I knew working with her would maybe be more of a benefit to me than to her. She opened doors for me to deepen my knowledge in other spaces of education policy, such as teacher prep, the Great Common Core, and the teacher pipeline. She enabled me to bring my experience from other aspects of education into a space that was completely new to me. Rather than seeing it as a deficit, she saw it as an asset. She's helped me recognize the type of leader I want to be. She doesn't lead with her accolades, but rather with humble quietness. Her ability to lead with kindness, manage, guide, and inspire staff and other stakeholders is bar none. She will advocate for you. Every time I run into someone that has worked with her, they are always reminiscent of how great it was to work with her and how lucky I am to be working with her. I'm just one example of someone on whom she's left a great impression. She always gracefully brings people together without taking the spotlight. She offers differing opinions in a kind and gracious manner with a smile, making sure everyone is heard and bringing others to see what they may not have understood or seen before. Most of all, she respects and creates space for everyone. She is a leader that we should all aspire to be. She's opening doors for younger generations so they can get access and opportunities to spaces that we may not have always had a place in, so that they too can become our future leaders. She sees the long game. So Marla, thank you for everything in your leadership in this field. This is just the beginning, this is not the end. Bringing together philanthropy to focus on the issues that matter most to all of us. Thanks.
My name is Nathan Manel. I'm the Executive Director of National PTA, and I'm honored to bring remarks on behalf of National PTA and also the Learning First Alliance. For those of you who are not familiar, LFA is a coalition of a dozen education associations representing 10 million members, teachers, students, parents, principals, superintendents, school board members, school counselors, and others who are united in supporting and advancing and advocating for our nation's most precious asset, our public schools. We are in unity in supporting this nomination. We're so excited for you to get this award. And it's easy to talk about Marla's many talents and traits. She's hardworking, she's principled, she's accurate, she's insistent, she's generous, she's clear-eyed, of course, and she's also purposeful and intentional about the support and practice of public education and making sure that it's excellent for all students. She's not one just to describe a problem, or some of us put it on a pedestal and admire the problem. She's not content to leave it there, but instead she understands all the contextual complexities of a problem. She's willing to reach deep into her understanding of research, practice, and experience, and she's great at forging solutions with partners to make sure that it has the desired results. PTA is definitely a relational organization, I always say that, and we are always seeing and valuing that Marla brings to the table humility, kindness, and inclusion. In the DC power market, those are undervalued qualities that we hold in very high regard that she carries. But when you look at all those things I just mentioned, they are amplified in the hands of somebody who is a skillful community builder. And so she shares her knowledge and her relationships willingly. She comes to the table with an open mind, willing to see what you know and what you know that she doesn't know. And she's always eager to find solutions. So if you sat with her, whether she's conducting a meeting, as she has many times with LFA, whether she's facilitating a discussion, or whether she's tackling multiple issues simultaneously, you can count on the fact that she will bring her professionalism and expertise as a community builder to the table. There are many who would say, cynics among us, that the education community is fractured and divided. Marla is the opposite of that. She is glue. And if you're on the side, as she is, about getting results for students, she will embrace you as a partner as well. All of us who are leaders in the Learning First Alliance are proud to know her, and it's always a pleasure to work with her. There are many people to respect in this field, aren't there? But I believe Marla rises to the top as a gem of a person. And if I put that in other words, we all know that there are people who are respected, and then there are people who are loved. And Marla is both. So we acknowledge her, we honor her in the reception of this reward, and we wish you the best in your continued service to this education community.
Is this on? Well, it's interesting that I'm here to talk about Kent. My name is Fred Freelow. I started in philanthropy at the Rockefeller Foundation in 2000, in large part because of Marla. So I do have to acknowledge that I wouldn't have been doing this for over 20 years if it wasn't for her. But I'm here to talk about Kent, who I've known for a long time. And this award is for principled leadership and bold action in the field. And Kent has taken bold action, often against conventional wisdom, many, many times in his career. But I'm going to give you just 3 examples. At the Department of Education, when there were powerful efforts to narrow what kind of educational research was needed, he worked hard to broaden what was valued by privileging the engagement of professionals working directly with children. Next, at Temple, rather than turn away from the city's problems, he supported efforts to connect the university to the people of Philadelphia. And finally, at the Southern Education Foundation, he built a district leadership program focused on equity, and he continued this focus on districts and equity at Hewlett. So for these reasons, and many, many others I don't have time to talk about now, I believe Kent is the right person for this award, and I'm sure all of you do too. Thank you.
I guess it's good afternoon still. I'm standing in between you and lunch and hearing from the wonderful Kent and Marla. So I'll try to keep my remarks brief, if not accurate. But I will say, given Kent McGuire's extensive career and commitment, as we've all heard a bit about, you would expect that he knows lots of people. you would expect that he actually would be pretty popular in a room like this. And for those of you who don't know Kent, and if you've ever wondered how popular he is, try walking across a conference room with him and seeing how many people you might bump into along the way when you're with him. He's a really popular guy. And as I was thinking about it, I was trying to figure out the name. And then I said, have you ever noticed how people who are really popular have nicknames? And they tend to be really cool nicknames. Like some of them sound like Dr. M or maybe G-Dad or even Black Superman, I've heard. And then word on the street is that some people even call you OG. Have you ever heard of that? That you can be called like an OG, but given your extensive career, how much you know, we might expect some of that. Kent has many reasons to be popular, to be known for all that he does. He's kind of funny. If you've ever had a conversation with you, he can keep you laughing a bit. He dresses nice. You know, so somebody mentioned last night that he has swag when he walks. He's a great storyteller. Even if they can sometimes be long, he's an excellent storyteller. But the number one reason I would say that Kent McGuire is probably one of the most popular people that I've ever met is that he is a one-man, top-notch search and placement firm. I don't know if any of you ever noticed that. In fact, many people in this room have jobs because of Kent. Like, he's actually helped many of us in this room get jobs because of his excellent placement services. And in fact, it was almost 7 years ago to this date where Kent asked Erica Miller of Isaacson Miller to lead a search to find program officers to come to Hewlett. I should say, though, he actually assisted her, too, in doing the search. He did not actually allow Erica to do the search alone. Kent assisted Erica in doing the search for the position. But in 2017, one of the choices that Kent McGuire took was that he believed in me. And some people might even say that he took a risk when he did so, and many other people doubted his decision. But you believed in me. So, Dr. McGuire, I would like to say, as a result of your belief in me, I've been able to soar higher than I could have ever imagined that I would. The Hewlett Foundation is an example of a national funder who's actually advancing racial justice. And this is all as a result of your leadership. So I want to thank you in front of everyone for your greatness. Thank you.
So, thank you. And while I had asked Marla and Kent to be prepared to share a few remarks and reflect on 30 years of GFE, I did that to make sure you would be here. But you still have the opportunity. So please join us on stage. Let us thank you. Again, get your flowers. You have flowers. Yeah, go around. Go. Let's give them a moment.
Oh, amazing. I'm glad to be on the stage with you. I'm glad you're here.
Hugs all around. So they're getting their flowers, literally and figuratively. But also, you'll notice in their hands, hold up your award, Kent, please. Just so you know, this is a flame. Hand-blown glass flame by a local artist, but really to honor the flames that you both are. So join us here. Do you still want to give some remarks? Yeah. Yes, of course.
Not the ones I had planned.
Okay, all good. Well, listen.
Marla should go first.
Here, join us here. Come
Okay.
around.
Yeah, make her around here.
Do you have a mic, Marla?
I don't think I do, but I can just.
You want to use this one?
Stand right here.
Okay.
I'm going to put my beautiful award, and maybe I'll hold my flowers, and it makes me feel like. Good afternoon, everyone. These are the notes about the origin story of GFE that I was going to share, which I'm not going to share now, I don't think. You all are sneaks, is all that I can say. I am I am the surpriser, not the surprisee, and you have really surprised me. And all I could think of, in addition to immense gratitude for the privilege of the work that I've done and the privilege of knowing the people on this stage and all of you, is that the conversations that we have had leading into the values that you put into this amazing award, this is what Grantmakers for Education is all about. And Kent, it's been such an honor to work in this field for you for these many years. Had a little joke that we were going to start off with about, wow, you know, I was a young program officer at the Rockefeller Foundation, and a bunch of us came together and decided we needed to create a new type of organization. And can you believe that was almost 30 years ago? And do you know how that makes me feel? And Kent was going to say, old. Because it really does. But it also makes me feel pretty amazing. And I just want to say one or two things about that organization, this organization, because it's you, and it's achieved, Nicole, everyone who is involved, been on the board and staff over the years, more than we ever imagined. And when it began, we had a vision that it wouldn't just be an organization that meets a couple of times a year, but created community around a set of values. We wanted a venue to talk and share and learn and do content as well as craft. More importantly, we really wanted to challenge each other. And I want to share two quotes with you, and then I'm going to say my thanks and turn it over to my esteemed colleague. So one quote was from the early mission statement of the organization. The first one, it said, "To improve educational outcomes for students by strengthening philanthropy's capacity and effectiveness." We might be a little broader today, we might use a little different language, but it's still powerful. And I want to share a quote from Peter Gerber. I don't know if many in this room remember that name. He was at the MacArthur Foundation, and there was a story that came out when Grantmakers for Education was founded. And his quote in that story was, we've gotten together, you know, we've had an organization that helped us get together before, but it's a different time now, and we're ready for gutsier conversations. So when you use that word, Nicole, I thought back to that quote. So all I can say is, being in the philanthropic world, being in the union world, which still allows me to be in the philanthropic world, is a tremendous privilege. You guys have blown me away, my amazing colleagues and friends, Sheethal and Nathan, particularly for their words, and of course, Fred and Charmaine, all people who I admire and look up to and have been privileged to work with. I am thrilled, I am honored, I am shocked. I'm sure I'm incoherent because you really surprised me. Thank you so much, and it is now to my great friend and colleague who I have tried to emulate, follow, and listen to all these years, Kent McGuire.
This week, I think of myself as someone who's got really good, intelligent networks, you know, and I know what's going on. People talk to me, they tell me things, and there's just been a series of conspiracies all week. I just survived one last night, and here I am again. Here I am again. I was prepared to come up here and overcome the fact that we started this that long ago, and speak about the moment. So I will try to speak about the moment for just a second. If we thought it made sense 30 years ago, Marla, to put our heads together, that we might actually think more clearly, develop more robust strategies, be more inclusive in thinking about our work if we organized ourselves. I think that was true then, but it couldn't be more true now. When I think about what's happening in the education sector, I worry about the resources shrinking instead of growing or expanding in the philanthropic space. If there was ever a time for us to figure out how to work and think and reach out together, we are in it. And if you're going to celebrate a 30th anniversary, then you should do it with gusto, Nicole. And we should rally around education funders to make sure that there's too much talk about what we're not doing right and not nearly enough conversation about all that we're doing right, all that the schools are doing right. And so we need to lift up a narrative in 2025 that gives us the kind of confidence and momentum that we need to sort of lean into these stiff winds that we're facing. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you. I'm going to be way more suspicious of people who I thought I trusted the rest of this year. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
He said, boy. So thank you all. Thank you, Kent. Thank you, Marla. Obviously instrumental in forming this organization as its first co-chairs 30 years ago, but also just as a personal note, thank you both. Marla was actually my first welcome email. Yes, literally my first welcome email. And as some of you may or may not know, much of this conference experience wouldn't have been possible without Kent. So all the praise that I and our team have been getting for such an enlivening conference this year, each one of them, and especially Kent and Marla, so thank you both so much. There is an opportunity for you all, 2 opportunities for you all to also contribute some congratulatory messages. If we have them up, just because I can't see them and I don't see anything here, we've got 2 digital celebration cards that are going, so either scan the QR codes now, we'll share them with you both later, and then we'll also circulate them to folks who aren't here. So you'll receive some more flowers a little bit later from Grantmakers for Education and the entire community. And those of you who might be able to stay for a little bit longer, we'll have a lunch reception. Join us in Orchestra CD for that. But we will also celebrate the 30th anniversary next year with gusto, certainly at the conference, but beyond. So I will also tell you that next year's conference is in Memphis, Tennessee, selected in part because it was an early convening site for Grantmakers for Education all those decades ago. So join us next October, 21st, 23rd, in Memphis. And then just because I need to, before you leave, remember to complete the session surveys and the conference survey that you'll get. If you've signed up for airport transportation, but the buses will shuttle between the airports, go to the 11th Street side a little bit before your allotted time, and Kyle and Paul will be here if you have any questions. But more importantly, and most importantly, thank you all for being here. Thank you for staying this entire week, and thank you, Kent and Marla, for really making all of this possible. So safe travels, stay if you can, but thank you, thank you, thank you.